The mare stopped fighting the bit the moment the rider laid a hand on her neck, and that was how Marshal Eli Mercer knew the thief was not what the town had been promised. Men who stole horses for money rode them hard and mean. This rider had pushed the bay mare to the edge of lather, yes, but the hand on her neck was light, grateful, almost apologetic. Eli stepped from the dark mouth of the livery alley and leveled his revolver. Easy now. The rider turned. Smaller than he expected. Coat too large. Hat brim low. The alley smelled of wet hay, cold iron, and the snow drifting in from Main Street. Somewhere beyond the stable wall, a piano in the saloon was losing a fight with the same sad tune it had been stumbling through all evening. "Step down," Eli said. The rider slid off the mare and lifted both hands. Lantern light caught a bruised cheekbone and a mouth set hard against pain. Not a boy, a woman. Before we go further, settle in wherever you are tonight and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. It is a comfort on cold nights like this to know how far a story can travel and who is keeping the fire with us. "That mare belongs to August Voss," Eli said. Her laugh held no amusement. "That mare belonged to my father before Voss cheated him out of half his herd and all his sleep." He kept the gun steady. "Name?" She hesitated just once. "Cora Bell." Eli knew it then. Ezra Bell's daughter. Ezra had died pinned under a wagon during spring thaw, and within 2 years August Voss had swallowed almost the whole Bell place through liens, debts, and paper nobody in Bitter Wash had ever been allowed to examine too closely. Cora stood in the snow with one glove torn at the wrist. In the slit of bare skin above it, Eli saw old rope marks, faded yellow and brown. "Who did that?" he asked. "That matter to the law tonight?" "It might." Her eyes lifted to his, dark and tired and flat with experience. "Voss came into the kitchen after midnight. He locked the door. I laid a skillet across his mouth, took back my father's mare, and left before he could decide whether to break my jaw or just sell me farther away." The wind slipped through the alley and found the sweat on Eli's neck. He had worn the badge less than a year, long enough to know the law and Bitter Wash bent easiest where money leaned on it, and August Voss owned more weight than most men could lift. "Come with me," Eli said. "Jail?" "Yes." And then, he should have given her a clean answer. "Hearing at sunrise. Formal charge. Proper order." Instead, he heard himself say, "Then we see whether this town still knows the difference between a complaint and a claim." He walked her through the sleeping street without shackles. Inside the jail office, the stove glowed low and red. Eli gave her the chair by the fire instead of the cell, set water on to heat, and wrote the charge in careful script he did not trust. Unlawful taking of one bay mare. When he looked up, Cora was watching him with the wary expression of a person who had been offered kindness before and paid double for it later. "You can put me behind bars if it troubles your conscience," she said. "It troubles my conscience less than handing a woman back to the man who bruised her." For the first time, something other than exhaustion crossed her face. Surprise, maybe, or the beginning of belief. He set bread and salt pork before her. She ate quickly but without greed. "Why this horse?" he asked. "Because she's fast. Because Voss keeps a lockbox at his south pasture cabin. Because there are deeds and debt notes in it that don't match the papers filed in town. I found one page weeks ago. Not enough to save the land. Enough to prove he's been forging figures. You brought that to no one." She looked at him as if he had asked why smoke rose. Minnie Shaw brought him a complaint after her husband died. Next morning her barn burned with both milk cows inside it. No one saw a thing. No one ever does when August Voss is teaching a lesson. Eli knew about the fire. He had helped pull charred boards off the ruins with his own hands. He had also known, though he had not spoken it aloud, that accidents rarely arrived with boot prints. A fist struck the front door. Cora flinched before she could stop herself. Eli crossed to the window and parted the curtain a finger's width. August Voss sat his horse at the hitch rail, fur collar turned up against the weather, split lip dark in the lamplight. 2 men waited behind him with the easy stillness of hired trouble. "Marshal," Voss called. "I hear you found something of mine." That smile in his voice told Eli more than any witness ever had. He opened the door only as far as the chain allowed. Snow hissed sideways through the light. "She'll answer in court at sunup," Eli said. Voss's eyes slid past him and fixed on Cora by the stove. "That girl is under contract." "No," Cora said from inside the office, voice steady now. I was under threat. Voss ignored her. Return the mare and the girl, and I'll forget the inconvenience. The easy path stood there waiting. Hand her over. Keep the peace. Let the county tell itself the law had done its work. Instead, Eli asked, Did you force your way into the Bell kitchen tonight? Voss smiled with one side of his mouth. Careful, boy. It was the same tone older men had used on Eli all year, the one that said he might wear a badge but still belonged at the children's end of the table. His brother Jonah had heard it too, right up until somebody left him dead in a creek bed and called it a fall. Eli slid the deadbolt home. You want more than talk, he said. Come back with a warrant. Voss's face changed very little. That made it worse. You don't know what kind of story you've stepped into, he said softly. Maybe not, Eli answered. But I know who's been writing it. When the writers were gone, the office stayed silent for several breaths. You shouldn't have done that, Cora said. Probably not. He won't come at you straight. Men like him rarely do. He poured coffee into 2 tin cups. After a while, because there was no sense pretending the truth was not in the room with them, he said, My brother wore this badge before me. He started asking questions about forged cattle tallies and land transfers. 6 weeks later, he was dead in a creek with his jaw broken. Folks called it a fall. Cora lowered her cup. You think Voss had him killed? I know Jonah did not fall. That was as near to the wound as Eli ever let anyone come. Cora reached into her boot and drew out a folded scrap of paper, softened by sweat and wear. This is the page I stole from the pasture cabin a month ago. He opened it. Same parcel. 2 different debt totals. One filed, one real. Voss had been multiplying ruin in ink. If the rest of that box matches this, Eli said, Talbot won't be able to bury it. He'll try. Then we bring him enough that trying becomes dangerous. She held his gaze. You're talking about stealing evidence from a rich man's cabin with a badge pinned to your chest. I'm talking about the law arriving a little late and choosing not to stay that way. He rose and wrote 2 notes by lamplight, one to Judge Talbot, one to Minnie Shaw. If he and Cora were not back by noon, Talbot was to follow to the south pasture with every honest soul he could stomach standing beside him. Cora watched him fold the notes. Why her? Because women who have been left alone with grief are often braver than town councils. That almost earned a smile. They left before dawn on 2 town horses, not the bay mare. Snow had crusted over the flats north of Bitter Wash, and each hoof step made the dry, brittle sound of bone under pressure. Cora rode low and balanced, saving her horse where lesser riders would have wasted him. Eli noticed the way she loosened the rein when the gelding grew nervous at drifting sage, and the way she never once asked if he regretted his choice. At a fence break above Dry Creek, Eli dropped from the saddle and studied the ground. 3 riders passed here not long ago. One horse is dragging a loose rear shoe. Another carries a heavy man who favors his left hip. You read tracks like letters, Cora said. Jonah taught me. My father taught me horses. Said fear leaves the same look in a person and an animal. Only animals don't lie about it. That your gift, then? One of them. She glanced toward him. Yours is seeing what people try to step over. He did not answer, because hearing it aloud made him feel too close to something he had been missing. The pasture cabin crouched in a fold of land by the frozen creek, a low timber building with a smoke thread rising from the chimney. Cora swore under her breath. He's here. So are the papers, Eli said. She looked toward the cabin, toward the horses tied outside, toward the road back to town no one would blame them for taking. If we turn around now, he burns everything by breakfast. That was the heart of it. Safety or truth, badge or justice, reputation or the dead brother who had asked him not to look away. If you had been there, with the snow starting to close the road behind you and a rich man waiting ahead with every advantage except the truth, what would you have done? Would you have turned back and protected your own skin, or gone forward and trusted that some choices are worth paying for? Tell me in the comments, because this is where a life usually reveals what it has been made of all along. They circled through the cottonwoods and came to the back window. It was swollen tight with cold. Eli worked it upward a fraction at a time while Cora kept watch. From inside came the scrape of boots and one man coughing into the stove heat. Cora slipped through first. Eli followed. The office room was empty. Beyond the inner door, voices. You made copies, August Voss was saying. That was foolish. Eli looked through the cracked opening and saw more than he expected. Voss by the stove, 2 armed men, and at the table the county records clerk, Mr. Pritchard, hands tied and spectacles broken, blood on his collar. On the desk behind them sat a black iron lockbox. So Voss already knew the papers were dangerous. Cora's hand closed around the iron poker near the hearth. Eli gave the smallest nod. She kicked the door wide. The room snapped awake. Eli came in with his revolver high. Hands up. For one clean beat, everybody froze. Then the hired man by the window lunged for a shotgun. Eli fired once. Splinters burst from the chair beside the gun, and the blast sent it skidding under the table. The second man reached for his holster. Cora broke his wrist with the poker before leather cleared. Voss yanked Pritchard up by the collar and jammed a revolver under the clerk's jaw. "Drop it, Marshal." Eli held steady. Pritchard whimpered once and then bit it off. Voss smiled, though his eyes had gone flat. "Your brother was smarter than you. At least he knew enough to die quiet." The sentence hit Eli like a boot to the chest, but he did not move. Cora did. She looked at Voss's vest and said, calm as creek water, "You still keep the key on your watch chain." Voss glanced down by instinct. Eli fired at the stovepipe elbow above his head. The room erupted in soot and sparks. Pritchard ducked. Cora drove through the black cloud and slammed the poker across Voss's gun hand. The revolver flew. Eli crashed into the man with the broken wrist while the shotgun rider scrambled under the table. Boots hammered the floor. Somebody shouted. Somebody bled. In the middle of it, Eli saw the knife appear in Voss's fist and understood a half-second too late where it was headed. Cora. She turned, caught Voss's wrist with both hands, and used the whole fierce weight of her body to ram him backward into the stove. Iron rang. He cursed and backhanded her so hard she hit the desk. The lockbox slid and nearly toppled. Eli struck the second hired man across the temple with his revolver barrel, then swung toward Voss. Voss had Cora by the throat. Eli could have shot. He also could have killed her. So he did the harder thing. He holstered the gun, grabbed Jonah's old lesson out of memory, and went at Voss barehanded. They hit the floor in front of the stove. Voss was heavier, stronger in the shoulders, mean with it. Eli took a fist across the mouth and tasted blood. Took another above the eye and saw white. Then he drove his thumb into the split lip Cora's skillet had left, felt Voss rear back, and used the space to slam his forehead into the cattle baron's nose. Bone cracked. Cora dropped to one knee, gasping, found the watch chain hanging loose, and tore it free. The key came with it. Outside, riders thundered into the yard. Voss laughed blood through his teeth. "That'll be the rest of mine." For one terrible second Eli thought he was right. Then Judge Talbot's voice came through the front door, breathless and angry. "Mercer, if you have dragged me into some idiotic—" He stopped when he saw the room. Behind him stood Minnie Shaw in her widow's black coat. Ben Harrow from the feed store rubbing the same thumb over his palm he always rubbed when nervous, Deputy Lusk with a rifle, and 3 ranchers Voss had bled dry one paper cut at a time. Witnesses. Pritchard got to his knees. "Open the box," he rasped. Cora fitted the key. Inside lay deeds, debt notes, receipts, a forged seal, and one narrow ledger wrapped in oilcloth. Eli opened it and found line after line of names, parcels, false totals, threats paid out in feed, stock, and hired men. Then he found Jonah Mercer. Problem account, the ledger read. Resolved at Dry Creek Crossing. The room went still enough to hear the stove ticking. Judge Talbot read over Eli's arm and lost what little color he had. Minnie Shaw crossed herself. Voss pushed himself up on one elbow, nose crooked, dignity draining by the second. "You have no idea what you're looking at." Eli did. He was looking at proof. At his brother's grave written in another man's hand. At every family in the valley that had been strangled slow and told to call it business. The cliff edge had been reached. From there, the only way was through. By noon the courthouse in Bitter Wash was full clear to the door, wet leather and wood smoke thick in the air. Judge Talbot sat higher than usual, as if elevation might put distance between him and his own cowardice. He laid the lockbox open on the evidence table for everyone to see. He put the ledger beside it. He called Pritchard first, then Minnie Shaw, then Ben Harrow, then 2 ranchers whose land payments had doubled on paper after they signed. Each witness added a board to the scaffold under August Voss's feet. When Voss's lawyer argued theft, Eli answered with dates, signatures, and the line item beside Jonah's name. When the lawyer called Cora a liar and a servant girl who had repaid lawful debt with violence, Eli asked him to explain the second set of totals, the copied seal, the burned barn, the threats, the clerk held at gunpoint. The lawyer sat down because there was nowhere left standing to do it from. Voss finally rose and pointed straight at Eli. "You think this makes you righteous?" "No," Eli said. "I think it makes me late." The room took that in like dry ground taking rain. Cora testified last. She did not cry. She did not plead. She told the truth the way a person sets a rock on a grave, plainly, because anything else would be an insult to the dead. By dusk, Judge Talbot had signed warrants for fraud, coercion, arson, conspiracy, unlawful detention, and murder referral to the territorial court. Federal review would take the land records. August Voss was let out in irons while the same townspeople who had once lowered their eyes now watched him go without moving aside. Justice did not make a joyful sound. It made a tired one, like a heavy gate finally swinging where rust had held it too long. That night, after the crowd thinned and the last witness had gone home, Eli sat in the jail office with one eye swelling shut and both hands raw. Cora sat opposite him with a split lip and a bruise darkening under her cheekbone. The stove clicked softly. Coffee burned on the back of the iron plate. "You should let Doc Hensley look at your ribs," she said. "You first." "That sounds like a standoff." "It may be the only one I win today." She smiled, and because the day had been what it was, the sight of it hit him harder than any fist. He took a small bundle from his coat pocket and set it on the table. "Found this under the ledger." Cora unfolded the handkerchief. Inside lay a brass concho from a bridle, worn smooth by years of use. "My father's," she whispered. "Thought it might belong to someone other than August Voss." Her thumb moved over the dent in the metal. For a moment, she looked very young. Then not young at all. "I stopped making plans after my mother died," she said quietly. "Every time I wanted something after that, it felt like I was standing too close to God's notice." Eli looked into the stove. "Jonah used to say grief is just love with nowhere to set down." Cora swallowed. "That's cruelly true. It's the best thing he ever gave me." She met his eyes across the table. "No, the best thing he gave you was the part of him you kept." That line stayed between them, warm as the fire. If this story is moving you, then you are exactly who it was written for. A like and a subscribe tells us to keep making room for stories where the good are not foolish, the wounded are not forgotten, and mercy still has muscle in it. Eli opened the salve tin and moved to kneel beside her chair. "Hold still." "I am still." "No," he said, touching her split lip as gently as he could. "You only look that way." She breathed in, small and sharp. He could smell pine smoke in her coat under the dust and blood, and feel how much of his life had been spent standing just outside his own happiness because he thought grief gave him that duty. "Why didn't you ever marry?" she asked. He almost laughed. "Because I kept waiting to become the sort of man who wouldn't ask someone else to live beside his ghosts." "And did you?" He looked at her. "Not yet." Cora closed her fingers around the brass concho. "Maybe a home ain't where ghosts are gone," she said. "Maybe it's where they finally have to share the porch." He had no answer worthy of that. Deputy Lusk burst in a moment later with news that federal riders would arrive by morning, spoiling whatever might have happened next. But after he left, the room had changed. The air itself knew it. At the door, Cora paused. "When you told August Voss no, I think your brother would have known you on sight." After she was gone, Eli sat in the stove light and realized some words did not comfort a man so much as hand him back his own name. Spring brought federal men, surveyors, and enough stamped documents to make Bitter Wash believe the old order had truly broken. One of Voss's hired riders finally admitted what had happened at Dry Creek. Jonah Mercer had found the ledger, confronted Voss, and been left for the water to explain. That testimony sealed the murder charge. August Voss lost everything. The south pasture, the townhouse, the bank notes, the contracts, his public standing. Men who had once tipped hats to him now spoke of him in the same tone they used for blizzards and disease. Dangerous, passing, and best survived together. He went east in chains before the summer grass had fully greened and never again set boot to Bitter Wash soil. The good that followed came quieter. Minnie Shaw got 2 new milk cows and a barn raised by neighbors ashamed of how long she had been left alone. Pritchard kept his clerkship. Judge Talbot, humiliated into usefulness, signed every corrected filing with a careful hand. Cora won back the creek strip and enough of the Bell land to build a life. She opened a small horse line there, breaking and gentling stock for families who could not pay Voss prices and for women who had been told horses were men's work. Eli helped mend fences, shoe restless mares, and haul timber for a new barn. People talked for a while. Then the work outlived the gossip. Late that June, he found her at the pasture gate, one hand resting on the neck of a nervous roan filly no one else could get near. "I brought something," he said. She took the folded paper from him and read it. A corrected deed for Bell Creek Horse Line, and alongside it a separate parcel on the rise above the creek, transferred to Elias Mercer should he choose to build there. Her eyes moved back to his. "That's a bold little document. I've been late to a number of things," he said. "Didn't care to be late to this too." He drew a breath that felt larger than any he had taken in court. "I don't want to visit your life from horseback anymore. I want to carry it into it. I want your hard days as much as your easy ones. If that's too much, say so, and I'll still thank God you lived." Cora looked at him a long time, while the filly breathed into her palm and meadowlarks stitched song through the dusk. Then she said, very softly, "A home ain't the place you hide your hurt. It's the place you can set it down." He stepped closer. "Then let me set mine down here." When she kissed him, it was with the grave tenderness of a woman who knew exactly what she was choosing and exactly what it had cost her to choose again. They married in autumn under a clear sky that gave no sign of blessing and did not need to. Bitter wash came anyway. Minnie brought pie. Pritchard brought flowers that looked embarrassed to be there. Judge Talbot, who had no gift for emotion, brought nails and a new latch for the front door. Eli kept the badge one more year and then laid it down by choice, which felt better than wearing it ever had. Years later, Mercy came back for him in a snowstorm. He was 34 and foolish enough to think he could beat weather through the pass above Dead Man's Fork with a medicine crate in the wagon bed. The left wheel broke through a cornice. The team screamed. The wagon pitched, rolled, and threw him into a stand of scrub pine below the trail. When he tried to stand, his leg answered with bright white pain and nothing else. Snow thickened. Dusk fell. Eli lay half-buried beside the shattered wagon and understood, with a calm that almost insulted him, that this was how men disappeared. Then he heard a voice above the wind. "Eli Mercer, if you die doing something this stupid, I will never forgive you." Cora came down the slope on a rope, boots digging for purchase, Jonah's old pocket knife between her teeth. She had tracked him because his lead gelding always favored the right forefoot when tired, and because she had once watched a young Marshal Red Truth in the snow when everyone else was content to miss it. She splinted the leg in the dark, cut the team free, shaved dry heartwood from wet pine for a fire, sat through the whole black night with his head in her lap, and fed him bitter coffee one swallow at a time each time pain tried to drag him under. At dawn she got him home alive. That was how the mercy he gave a horse thief saved his own life years later. Not through magic, not through debt, but because kindness sets a post in the future, and if grace is with you, one day it finds you again carrying a lantern. By the time their hair had silver in it, Bell Creek had become the kind of place people slowed for without entirely knowing why. Children remembered the patient mares. Widows remembered Cora's steady hands. Men remembered that Eli listened. Old fear thinned. New laughter took root. One September evening nearly 20 years after the night in the alley, their grandchildren ran the pasture edge chasing grasshoppers while Cora sat on the porch mending a bridle cheek and Eli split kindling below the steps, favoring the leg that still ached when weather turned. She looked up, caught him watching her, and smiled that same calm, dangerous smile that had once faced down a rich man and a locked world. He carried the wood to the porch, and she touched 2 fingers to his wrist, as if confirming something precious was still there. The last of the sun lay over Bell Creek like a blessing that had finally learned their names. Next time, we'll tell the story of the deaf seamstress sent west as payment on a debt, and the widowed ranch cook who was the first man patient enough to learn the language of her hands.